It didn't take long for word to spread. One of the employees, who worked in the HR department, stumbled across an email that changed everything. Emily's husband, the CEO, had been checking in on the hiring process. He wanted an update on the interviews, particularly the one with the woman who had seemed out of place. As soon as the HR employee recognized Emily's name, panic set in. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks. Emily was the CEO's wife, the same woman they had mocked and dismissed. Now the question lingered: how would they handle the fallout? Would they try to cover up their mistake, or would they face the consequences of their actions? Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: this wasn't just another hiring error. It was a moment that could shake the very foundations of the company, and Emily was at the center of it all. But she wasn't done yet. She hadn't forgotten the way they treated her, and in her mind, the story was far from over. The days after the interview were a blur for Emily. She went about her daily routine, taking care of the house, spending time with her kids, but her mind kept drifting back to what had happened. She couldn't help but wonder if the hiring managers had intentionally singled her out because they thought she didn't belong. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. The humiliation wasn't just about being turned away, it was the way they had dismissed her, as if she were invisible, unworthy of even the smallest amount of respect. Meanwhile, at the company, the realization of their mistake was quickly spreading like wildfire. The HR employee who had discovered Emily's true identity couldn't believe it. He was torn between telling the truth and covering up the error, but the pressure of the situation was mounting. Soon, word would reach the higher-ups, and when it did, the hiring managers who had mocked Emily would be the first to face consequences. The CEO, her husband, had always been known for his fairness and integrity, but this was a different kind of problem. If he found out that his wife had been humiliated in his own company, it could cause a scandal, one that might threaten everything they had worked for. The tension inside the office was palpable. The hiring managers tried to act as if everything was fine, but the whispers and nervous glances made it clear they knew the storm was coming. They had no idea how Emily would respond or what her husband would do when he found out the truth. As the days passed, they anxiously waited for a call, an email, anything that would signal the moment they had been dreading. But Emily wasn't acting hastily. She had no intention of rushing into anything. She knew the best way to handle this was to let the situation unfold on its own, and when the time was right, she would make sure they understood the true cost of their actions. But as the tension reached its peak, Emily found herself facing a dilemma. She could walk away from this, let the company continue without her involvement, or she could use this moment to strike back, to show them that they had underestimated her. The stakes were higher than ever. As Emily weighed her options, a sudden phone call changed everything. It wasn't from her husband, the CEO. It was from one of the hiring managers, the very person who had mocked her during the interview. The tone in his voice was unsettling, a mix of nervousness and desperation. He told her that there had been a misunderstanding and wanted to arrange a meeting to clear the air. At first, Emily felt a rush of satisfaction, thinking this might be their way of apologizing for their behavior. But something didn't sit right. She could hear the tension in his voice, the forced politeness that only confirmed her suspicions. They were trying to cover their tracks. What he didn't know was that Emily was no longer the same woman who had walked into that office days ago. The humiliation had sparked something inside her, a fire she hadn't realized she had. She wasn't going to let them get away with this, not with a half-hearted apology or a quick cover-up. So she agreed to meet, but with a plan of her own. Meanwhile, in the company's boardroom, a quiet but urgent meeting was taking place. The CEO, Emily's husband, had been alerted about the situation. He had known that Emily was seeking a job, but he hadn't known about the interview or how badly she had been treated. The news of her mistreatment had shocked him to his core, but the truth wasn't the only bombshell that was about to drop. Emily's husband had just uncovered a hidden agenda, an undercurrent of corruption that was brewing among the senior management. It seemed that the hiring managers were not only guilty of mistreating his wife, but they had been involved in shady dealings that could tarnish the company's reputation. The stakes were higher than ever. Emily wasn't just fighting for respect now. It seemed that the hiring managers were not only guilty of mistreating his wife, but they had been involved in shady dealings that could tarnish the company's reputation. The stakes were higher than ever. Emily wasn't just fighting for respect now. She was standing on the edge of uncovering something much larger and much more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The clock was ticking. As Emily prepared for her meeting with the hiring managers, her husband was already planning his next move. Little did she know, the game had just changed. The meeting was set for late afternoon, and Emily entered the room with a calm that belied the storm inside her. The hiring managers were already seated, fidgeting nervously, clearly expecting an apology or some kind of reconciliation. As she sat down, she could see their guilt in their eyes. What they thought was going to be an easy conversation quickly turned into a tense standoff. Emily wasn't there to make small talk or to forgive them. She was there to take control of the situation and let them know just how far they had crossed the line. She started with one simple question: "Do you even know who I am?" The silence that followed was deafening. They glanced at each other, unsure how to respond. Emily let them stew in that discomfort for a moment, then revealed the truth. "I'm the wife of the CEO of this company. You mocked me, you judged me, and you dismissed me, all because of how I looked and because I wasn't the type you thought belonged here." She watched their faces drain of color as they realized the weight of their mistake. But just as they began to stammer out half-hearted apologies, the door to the conference room opened. Emily's husband stepped inside, his presence commanding the room. The hiring managers stood up in shock, trying to regain their composure, but it was clear they had already lost. He hadn't just come to defend his wife, he had come to reveal something far more devastating. "I've been reviewing your performance," he said, his voice cold, "and I've come to a shocking realization. You've been mismanaging this company from the inside. Your unethical practices, your favoritism, and your dishonesty have been undermining everything we've built." The hiring managers exchanged worried glances, but before they could react, the CEO dropped a bombshell. "Effective immediately, all of you are terminated. We'll also be conducting a full investigation into your actions." As Emily stood there, watching the consequences unfold, something inside her felt like a weight had been lifted. She had been humiliated, but now she held the power. The company that had once treated her as invisible would now feel the full force of her husband's authority, and their own corruption would be exposed. But just when it seemed like the moment had reached its peak, Emily's husband turned to her with a look of surprise. "There's one more thing, Emily. It's not just them. I've been keeping something from you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then pulled out a file from his briefcase, placing it in front of her. "It's about the board. They've been undermining our leadership for months. There's a conspiracy brewing that goes all the way to the top." The shock on Emily's face was evident. Everything she thought she knew was suddenly in question. The battle she had fought for respect had just opened up a whole new war. And this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the future of the company and everything she had built with her husband. The stakes had just gotten much higher, and the game was far from over.